we're going to do a pasta dish. Well, a sort of pasta dish. We're going to make shrimp and sausage linguine, and it's a Cajun dish. So we're going to get started with cooking our linguine. So in here I've got a pot of, well, when that stock pot mixes in there, this will be a pot of boiling water to put our pasta into, but we're making it chicken stock. So like I say, there's that stock cube in there. So we're going to get the heat onto that and get that boiling away. And then I've got dried linguine here. Okay, you can have fresh if you want, but obviously, like I say, we're into our first sort of proper day after the new year. Some of the shelves are a little bit empty. So anyway, we've got some dried linguine, and we're going to cook that, and then we're going to drain it. But don't let me forget, I want to keep a jug of that stock for later. Now, this is Cajun, so it's spicy. It's got some traditional ingredients, shrimp or prawns as we call them in the UK, a bit smaller than the ones old AB used. I'll tell you AB, isn't it? And some andouille sausage. That's nigh on impossible to get in the UK, especially at the last minute. So we're sort of improvising, but I'll tell you about that. So we're having Cajun, shrimp and sausage linguine. So I'm telling you, we want andouille sausage. Now, andouille sausage is sort of, well, it is related to andouillette. Well, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. That's how I pronounce it. It's got a T in it, or a cup of tea in it, which is French. Now, the French ones, they're made with offal. Now, these should be smoked, by the way. Couldn't find anything remote other than chorizo, which is quite a bit different. So you're going to have to imagine these are smoked. So the French ones are made with mainly offal. The andouille that you get from Louisiana, because we're Cajun cooking, is normally pork. Okay. Oh, excuse me. So what we've probably got, well, we have got more there than we really need, but that's simply because that's how it came in the packet. Now, my shrimp, my prawns, these are tiger prawns. This comes, as I said, from AB, from his YouTube channel, Smoking and Grilling with AB. And he does a lot of traditional Louisiana Cajun type cooking. And his shrimp are massive. They're the biggest I can get. We don't need to do a lot with them. But what we do want to do with our andouille sausage is we want some half moons. So I'm going to slice them down the middle and then slice them like that. Okay, so I'm just going to do that with all my remaining sausage. Like I say, there's probably only want about half of them sausages, but now I've opened the pack, I'll have to cook them really. So I'm going to carry on while I wait for that to come up to the boil, and then I've got other stuff prepared, because once we start, we want to be on a bit of a roll. Now my linguine's gone in, and I want to cook it till it's just al dente. So I've got a little timer on there. So first thing I'm doing with shrimp, give it a little season with some salt. Okay, some pepper. Now, this is another one of these where if you watch his video, it differs from what his written instructions are. Essentially, it's all the same. He does things slightly different order. And then we're just going to add some of this Cajun seasoning. Now, I'm not going to mix that all up because we'll be chucking that all in the pan. Now, I've got, I don't know what, about 50 grams or so of butter. And then you're going to want some oil. And we're going to fry them up in that. We also want some garlic. Where's my garlic? There's my garlic. Forgot to get my garlic press out. So, I'm telling you, this is Cajun. Cajun cooking is a subset of Louisiana cuisine. And it essentially incorporates, right, that's just coming up to the boil. So I'm just going to turn that down a minute. And remember, what did I say when that's finished boiling? I said, don't let me tip all that away. I want to keep a small jug of that stock. So basically, it incorporates French, Native American, and Spanish. Bloody hell! I've not had enough to drink over this Christmas holiday, and Spanish cuisine. And because of the style of cooking, locally sourced ingredients, things like that, it's often referred to as rustic. Okay, and it's usually quite simple in preparation, basic, and quite often it's just cooked in one pot. So where did this come from? Well, while we're debating that, let's start melting down that butter. So I'm just going to put that on a low heat. So I'm just going to get that wire out of the way, which you can't see. Okay, and I'm just going to put that butter in there. And we're going to add some oil. Okay. And we're just going to let that heat up. Now you might want some more oil a bit later. Okay. So we've got our garlic ready to go. We're going to need some more of that, but probably only when we come to sausage. Got our shrimp ready. Now you want to grate some Parmesan on. About half a cup of Parmesan. And then you will want a little bit extra to finish off with. Some chopped parsley, which I've done. A cup. I couldn't be bothered to change all these ingredients. So a cup, which is about 250 mils of double cream. In my case, we're using 50% fat creme fraiche. Creme fraiche. Obviously, there's sausage and juice of half a lemon, although that is apparently a little bit optional. So we're just waiting on that butter to melt so we can get cooking our shrimp. Now you want to cook your shrimp low and slow. Okay, you don't want to overcook your shrimp. These are going to cook quicker than his, because like I say, he's big things. And shrimp, andouille sausage, crawfish, which I think is in the UK we call crayfish or something like that. They're staple meats in Cajun cooking. And then you have your holy trinity of aromatic vegetables. Green pepper, which isn't going in this dish, because it doesn't have green pepper in this one. Onion, well that don't go in this dish either. And celery, well actually this don't go in that dish either. So we're not actually using any of those, but parsley is another important ingredient and we will be putting that in there. I'm just going to tip these into there, okay, and just going to spread them out, and we want to cook them until we get a nice bit of colour. I know I've added a little bit of that spice, but I'm going to sprinkle some more pepper. I don't think I'll add any more salt because quite a lot of salt went into there. But we're going to sprinkle a bit more of this Cajun spice over the top, or seasoning, partly because the andouille sausage isn't andouille sausage. Okay, now let me get rid of that. Just mop that up. Now, I just remembered, I said to you how he does things in slightly different order. I'm not going to put my garlic in. According to his written instructions, before you put shrimp in, you cook your garlic. But what we don't want to do is overdo the garlic, don't want to burn it. So I'm going to do it later, like he does in his video. So it's just a matter of now cooking these. I might have perhaps gone a little bit too low. Let's just turn that up a fraction. All right, that's just to stop. To remind me to check me linguine, and I think that might just about be there. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take out some of that broth, keep that, and then I'm draining the rest, and then I'm going to rinse it in cold water to cool it down. And as he said, people go, you just washed all that lovely broth off. No, you've absorbed a lot of the flavours, but we want to cool the linguine down and stop it cooking. Right, I've turned them over. They've had about a minute or so. And I'm just going to add a little bit, like he does, of that chopped parsley. But the rest of it will go in at the end. And the other thing, but you don't have to if you don't want to. I am wondering whether I need to bother. I'm using creme fraiche, aren't I? But I added juice of half a lemon. Okay, my linguine is draining there. So we're just going to carry on cooking that. So where does Cajun come from? Well, it's basically, the reason it has French roots and North American is simply because there was a group of people known as Acadians, not Arcadians, this is ACA, not ARC. Essentially come over from France, 17th century, and settled at what was sort of called New France. And it's like part of the eastern coast of what today Canada. And obviously they took their sort of cuisine with them, but when they got somewhere like that, they did start having to adapt, obviously because the climate was quite different. During the 18th century, however, the British kicked them all out, and they ended up resettling quite a long way away down in Louisiana, where they became known as Cajuns, hence Cajun cooking. But again, having shifted down there, completely different climate, again they had to adjust their recipes. And so, for instance, they were making cornbread, rather than obviously like wheat bread. So I'm going to give these a little bit longer, and then we're going to take them out and put them on a plate. But we don't clean our pan, because we're going to be cooking our sausage. That's the shrimp out. I did turn the heat down a little. Come off of there, you little bugger. These are minute compared to the ones old AB. Well, actually, it was his nephew and him cooking. So we're going to set that to one side, and this is where we now toss in that sausage. And what we want to do is just try and get them obviously in one layer, and then I'm going to add a little bit more Cajun. Some of them haven't separated properly when I cut them. I'm just going to add a little bit more of that Cajun spice, because like I say, andouille sausage should be smoked and sort of spiced. Okay, it is a traditional sort of sausage, like I say, to do with this. I'll probably end up making that too bloody hot now. Get rid of that. So we now want to fry this up, hopefully making a little bit crispy sort of ish on the outside. Okay, now this Cajun cooking, like I say, they were adopting techniques from Native Americans, but then about 1800 some of these Acadians had purchased slaves. They'd have 2 or 3 slaves, you know, from the West Indies, and some of them would work in their kitchens, and they would learn from them some of their cooking techniques, some of the sauces and dishes that they would make back home before they were stolen away, as it were. And so they started introducing these techniques. Equally, they introduced the Cajuns, as it were, to new ingredients like okra, and they sort of became part of this Cajun cooking. Now, it's true to say that most Cajun dishes that people eat today are not the same as these original settlers were cooking and eating, but they obviously have derived from those. And the other confusion is, because down in that region you get Creole and you get Cajun, and most people just say it's the same thing. It's not. Actually, in that area in Louisiana, Creole cooking was the sort of the main cuisine, and it was about 40 years after that that the Cajun cuisine started developing. So they're not quite the same thing. So, like I say, we just want to get them all cooked, and then once they've sort of gone a little bit crispy, I'm going to flip them. So I've turned my heat down low, okay, and I've removed most of my sausage so far. Just get them last bits out. Now, I'm going to set that to one side, and actually I might get myself a spatula for the next bit, because what we want to do, let me just rest that there, is this is where I'm going to take my garlic, okay, got 4 or 5 cloves of garlic or so, and we're going to just briefly do that garlic in there. Like I say, we don't want to burn it. I did also add a little bit more Cajun seasoning. I had a little taste of one of the sausages, and decided it's not a particularly strong Cajun dressing, that one. Now we're starting to get, obviously, the pan needing deglazing a bit there. Like I say, that's why we want to just keep that on low. Whoops, that spatula is going to make everything ping everywhere. I might have to use a wooden one. But now, this is where we're going to take your double cream, or in this case, creme fraiche, okay, and get that in there. Oh, forgot. He said, optionally, you can add tomato, and he used sun-dried tomatoes. But again, on his written recipe, he talks about using halved cherry tomatoes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of tomato puree, okay, didn't want a huge amount, and then we're just going to mix all that together and cook that through on low. So I was talking about adding a little bit more seasoning. Cajun dishes tend to be spicier than their continental, all over the handle, messy bugger, than their continental versions. Also, not that we're doing one for this dish, but they tend to make 2 types of roux. But it depends on what it's going to be used for. They have a dark roux, and then they have a light roux. And it's very similar to the French roux. Obviously, I imagine that's where it derived from. But generally, the roux was a thickening agent to go in something like the gumbo. However, it depended what the meat that was going in your gumbo was. So if, like us, you were putting shrimp in it, if you made what is one of the more, I say complicated, it's complicated in terms of it takes longer and you don't want to burn it. you want to make a dark roux to get that rich colour, then if you then put that in with something like shrimp, it will totally overpower the shrimp, and it's might as well not bothered. And so in that case they would tend to make a lighter roux. And like I say, made with the trinity of veg rather than perhaps the type that you would use in like French cooking. So anyway, we're just going to let that cook through for a bit. Just coming up to a bit of a simmer. Turn the heat up a little bit, it was rather low. So let's have a little taste just to see. Don't think I need to do any more with that. So I'm now just going to stir in that Parmesan, and once that's melted in there, I'm going to return. Ooh, it's got a bit of heat coming through. It don't come through instantly, but there's a little bit of a heat in there. Now, like I say, we might want to finish off with a little bit of Parmesan on the finished plate, but for now we want to take our linguine, and we just want to sort of gradually, whoops, now it decides to leak all water everywhere, mix that in. So at this stage I think I'm not going to add any more stock in, but now what we want to do is reintroduce the meat, as it were, back in there and get all them juices in there as well. Okay, and now simply a matter of mixing this through, and then we can, obviously we want to get that meat, the shrimp and the sausage, warm again, and then we'll have a little plating up and a little tasting. Bit of Parmesan over top, bit of parsley, and now let's have a nice taste. So here's a bit of the old sausage. Nice tasty shrimp. A little bit on the, like that chubby crunchy stage they go to, I think, when they're just a little bit overcooked, but not too bad. Let's taste the linguine. And that's full of flavour as well. But there you go. Your shrimp and sausage linguine, Cajun style, courtesy, like I say, of Smoking with A and B, and his nephew in this case. And then you get that nice heat through, developing but not overpowering. Spot on.